Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel for Q Plus EDU. My name is E. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the founder of Q Plus EDU. I'm so glad to have all of you with us today for this conversation with LGBTQ plus elders. So I will be here to moderate the chat and take questions. I'd prefer if you use the Q&A function for all questions that you might have throughout this panel. And if you have general discussion things, if you want to give feedback, feel free to leave those in the chat. Also, if there are any resources mentioned during this session, those will be included in the chat as well. And they will be posted next to this recording on our website in a week or two. So with that, I will turn it over to Kathryn to kick us off.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to a very important conversation that happens far too infrequently. And that is hearing from our elders, hearing their stories of triumph and sometimes not triumph, because both are okay. My name is Kathryn Gonzales. I'm the Operations and Programs Director at Out Youth, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. It is my pleasure to help moderate this conversation today. Our panelists, I will go around and allow them to introduce themselves in a moment. But as a reminder to everyone tuning in, we do have some prepared questions, but you are highly encouraged to submit your questions through the Q&A function, because this panel is for you. I will also say to those of you who are watching later, and maybe 20 years from now. That's a weird thought, isn't it? Hi, me. Yeah, wave at your 20-year younger self, everyone. Hi. Whoever is watching this in the future, if you do have follow-up questions, please do get in touch, and we will send those along to our panelists. So, to begin, we will go in alphabetical order. I'd like to do some introductions. So please say your name, your age, your pronouns, and what privileges you may have in life, what marginalizations you may move through the world with. And then we will get into your stories, I assure you. But claim your space, beginning with Anna.
Hello, my name is Anna Nguyen. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Vietnamese American transgender woman. I left Vietnam in 1975 as a refugee from the Vietnam War. I was 15 at the time, which makes me 60 years old to save you doing the math. So I went to England, spent a couple of years there, came to New York, and now I'm here in Texas. So as a Vietnamese American, I look fairly non-Vietnamese, so I really actually have had many advantages in life that most Vietnamese don't. I guess we can go further into our life stories later, our challenges and our triumphs. But for now, that's me.
Thank you, Anna. Darla, please claim your space.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Homadakuase, Wopula Tonka, Tonka Piachawawi. My name is Darla Harrison. I'm Sinchangu Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. I'm 65 years old in an elder status. And it doesn't feel like that because I don't feel like an elder, but you know, people look at me and acknowledge me as an elder. So I do my best in projecting that image they have of me, and I go by Two-Spirit. I go by two-spirit because I realize that I have a male and female spirit in me. And I go by she and her. And I'm proud to be a woman. And I speak for not only for two spirits, but for LGBTQ and also transgenders. I work at Haskell Indian University in Lawrence, Kansas, and basically all of them know my identity. At one point, the human resource person told me if I had any problems, if anyone talking about it or harassing me about it, to please let her know because it is a government job. And I said I will. As it is, we get students who are two-spirit. 2 years ago, we had a two-spirit powwow, two-spirit gay and lesbian transgender month, February, and it went really well. We had a student who initiated that and found someone to write a grant, and so that was made possible through that. I do speak up for the transgenders that come to our school because a lot of the folks there are basically my age, a little bit younger, and they're not too, you can tell they're not too fond of it. They don't really understand it, but they comply with it because, as you know, it's against the law, to be discriminatory against, people of different genders. And so I try to make myself available for them, and, and do the best that I can in representing them for them. I've lived in Lawrence since 87. And I'm honored to be on your panel. I whoever heard of me or seek me out, I want to thank you for that. And it's an honor to meet each and every one of you. I don't know where all of you are from, but Kansas, well, I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas, but it's a good state right now for me. With the virus and all this going on, I've been doing real good. I haven't taken the test. I'm being careful, and that's what it's all about, taking care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla. Rocky, please claim your space.
Hello. My name is Rocky Lane. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm 37 years old. My privileges include a masculine perception that people have of me when I come into space. I hold masculine space fairly well. I always have. Only recently has it given me any possible advantage, I guess, so I'm going to claim that privilege. And marginalizations are that I'm a Black man of trans experience living in Texas, and yeah, that's got a whole lot attached to it. And as of late, it's become a very hot topic in a lot of people's work and questioning on how to be better. And so I guess that also adds to my privilege of having the ability to speak for a very large community that I really shouldn't be the only one speaking for, but I do, and here I am, and I'm very happy to be here. I've never been called an elder before, but I have an old soul that has fought for many years outside of trans experience, just as a Black human. And I just want to acknowledge that I stand on the shoulders of very, 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 very amazing people and pioneers of this movement, including the people that are here today. And I'm very honored to be in your presence. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rocky. Rocky brings up a good point, the definition of elder. And for the purposes of this work, I do want to remind all of us that the primary audience for Q Plus EDU are students. So in much the same way that Rocky perhaps sits a little uncomfortably with the title elder, I am also familiar with having that thrust upon me by teenagers. Toby, please claim your space. And please unmute.
My name is Toby Johnson. I identify as a gay man and so use masculine pronouns. I'm 75 years old. I certainly my privilege is that I'm white and grew up middle class in America in the 1950s and 60s. I was a hippie. I was in Catholic religious life out of high school. That got me to San Francisco. I lived in San Francisco from 1970 to 1981. I've been a professional gay activist my entire life. Early on in San Francisco, I started working in a peer counseling telephone hotline, sort of crisis hotline for gay people. And from that, ended up with a PhD in counseling psychology, and also worked in a study of gay and gay prostitution, gay teenage hustlers. At that time, in the late 70s, I was a collaborator on a book about gay history, and sort of became very knowledgeable and what we'd say now woke to where the movement came from. I was there watching the movement as it happened, and in 1981 I moved back to hometown San Antonio. I was the gay therapist, the head of the Gay Alliance. My partner was warned. We've been married. We've been together 36 years now. He was a little younger than me when we met. He was warned that I was head of the homosexuals. Be careful. Well, that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me. I got to be a character in Austin because Kip and I moved to Austin in 1988 and took over running the Gay and Lesbian bookstore. There was a bookstore down on Lamar and 11th called Liberty Books. In those days before Google, the bookstore and the bulletin board was the center of the community. This is how people bought tickets to anything, how people knew about anything, where they came for news and books. And we had a wonderful collection, 3,000 or more gay genre books. I ended up from that as a literary editor. I've written 10 books about gay history, and particularly the topic of gay spirituality. The thing that has been most interesting for me in my life, because I come out of Catholic religious life, was how to be gay and spiritual without being trapped in the religions of the past. I think gay, lesbian, queer people represent a kind of a whole new understanding of what religion and spirituality are. We have to, because we don't fit into the old way. And now I've been a gay bed and breakfast owner in Colorado. My partner and I ended up back in Austin, where we started, sort of.
Thank you, Toby. A request of you, my friend. I would love to know the title of that book that you helped write, so that we can include it in Out Youth's Jerry Strickland Jr. Memorial Library. For those of you who are unaware, Out Youth actually runs the largest privately managed collection of LGBTQIA+ books and media in the state of Texas. So if you are needing reference books, if you want to learn about our history, if you want to read fictional stories about our people, if you want to get your hands on some graphic novels or even books designed to teach young children why queer people are fabulous.
May I proudly say that some of those books, I think, came from Liberty Books.
I would not doubt it.
Times in the beginnings of Out Youth, we made donations and cleaned out our bookshelves, and it's a wonderful thing. Books are a wonderful way to discover a history beyond oneself.
Yes, and to Claire, I would love that, Toby. And the question that I know inevitably comes up, given the point in time in which we exist being surrounded by a global pandemic that is not being well managed, especially in our home state. If there are books in the Out Youth Library that you would like to access, I saw that E posted a link to the library page on our website. I believe there is a link there to our catalog. If not, I will make sure that that is there. You can find any book that is in our collection and we will set it aside for you for curbside pickup. So to begin, when did you know? It's the question we always get asked, isn't it? When was that first moment that you knew you were different, that you knew you were other, or as we like to say at Out Youth, when did you know that you were magnificent because of who you were? Let's start with Anna.
I would start by maybe define what no means to me. I think my narrative is different from the common transgender or queer narrative of I've always known. I now thinking back, I remember very clearly, distinctively, signs and events and things that I said and did that should have been clues. But throughout my life, for the longest time, I didn't have the language, and most of us didn't have the language nor the knowledge to recognize what it was. So my knowing kind of came gradually. Pretty much over the past, I say, 15 years of my life. My journey started as a cross-dresser. Now, things kind of started to take a different direction for me when I recognized that cross-dressing brought me a unexplainable degree of peace and contentment. And that prompted me to explore that further. And about probably 8 years ago, I started seeing a gender specializing counselor. And after about a year of that, I came to the revelation that this is how I want to spend the rest of my life. This is how I would much rather spend the rest of my life. And that was when I made the decision. I guess that was when I kind of knew definitively that I am transgender.
Thank you, Anna. Darla, when did you know you were magnificent?
I did. I knew I was when I was 4 years old. I'm the oldest in my family, and I think my father wanted a son, but he got a daughter. So my mother was a nurse, and there was a time where I was outside on a tricycle. I'll give you this little story. I was outside, and this other lady said, "What is your daughter doing out there?" She looked out the window, and she seen me on a tricycle with a cigarette butt in my mouth, and this little girl playing. And so she came out there and got after me because I had that cigarette butt in my mouth. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're playing house." House? I said, "Yes, I'm the husband and she's my wife." So I knew then, and even in my first grade, I had a girlfriend. I had a girlfriend then. And all through my whole grade school, high school, I knew who I was. I knew I liked women. Didn't stop me from dating men. In high school, I had a couple of boyfriends, but then I think they understood where I was coming from. But when I really came out, and when I really knew, was when I came to high school. I was in junior college, and that's where I really came out. And when they caught me in the dorm with another girl going up to the counselor, going in there, and I went and asked her what's wrong, because I didn't think anything was wrong. And she says, well, you're not supposed to be sleeping with a girl. And I said, okay. And she says, do you have a problem with it? I said, no, do you? And she said, well, are you sure? You know, in other words, I think what I was trying to tell her is that I know who I am, and therefore that's who I am. Okay, well then, if you're gonna do anything in the dorm, then you need to take it off campus, go to a motel or whatever. And I said, okay. And so that's when I got into my first relationship. Because it was a 2-year college, I transferred to Oklahoma and got a bachelor's in sociology and criminal justice. And during the course of the time when I was with my first, it became very abusive. I allowed her to abuse me. So I'm a domestic violence, what do you call it? Anyway, a survivor. So I got out of that. I'm not ashamed to talk about it, because I find that there's a lot of problems within our population, within our group, because a lot of them don't know how to get out of it, or they're afraid to, or who can they trust, you know. And it scares me when that happens. And I find that when that happens, I try to talk with them, but it's up to them, you know. But that's when I found out who I was. And my mother, as I was growing up, I played with boy toys. My mother never stopped me. My father never did. They never made me play with doll toys and this and that. And I did a lot of things the boys did. So at that time, I realized who I was, you know, and it was okay with me, you know. And but if anyone started asking me who my boyfriend was, or, you know, if I was married, or if I, you know, I right away tell them, you know. I'm pretty much keep to myself until they start asking questions. I recently got married back in 2015, but I'm going through a divorce right now. And I find myself that during that relationship that I became someone else. I let someone else be more in control of what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And the only people that were seeing it wasn't me. So, you know, it's a process. And I've never been to any counselors, which I know probably would have helped me, and therapists. But, you know, Toby, you were talking about spirituality. Well, I'm into my spirituality. I'm into my traditions. And I'm also a sober. I've been sober for going on 36 years. And through the sobriety, I lean on my spiritual and traditional ways. And some of the groups that I participated with, Montana Two-Spirit, Texas Two-Spirit, Wichita Two-Spirit, as a person in that special mode, I would help them with their you know, traditional and spiritual ways. And so we would have chanupa, pipe ceremonies. We would have talking circles, and in that way, you know, it encourages other people that, you know, that it's a good way. You know, Christianity is good, but there's other ways to practice Christianity, you know, besides going into a church and dressing up. Because the way I believe, our Creator knows us in our nakedness. We don't have to put anything on. They know us just the way we are. And so with that, you know, knowing who I am, what I believe in is who I am. And my thing is, the older you get, you don't care what people think about you, or, you know, it's their loss, you know, because we continue to move on. I continue to move on. Someone once told me, if you find yourself stuck in some place, it's going to be really hard to get out of that situation. It's like, you know, if you go to a carnival, you know, those horses, you know, you try to shoot them because they're always moving. Well, you can't hurt them. You can't, you know, they can't be a target if they're moving. So if you keep moving your energy, you keep moving, then you're going to be okay. At the same time, nurture and heal yourself and take care of yourself. So I've been this way, well, I guess since I was born, you know, and I really believe that you are born who you are. And, you know, I believe that if you were born a male, but you inside your spirit is a female, and you want to transgender to a female, then be it in the same way the other way around. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Darla.
Yeah.
I do want to remind everyone watching that we do have at least one Q plus EDU session on domestic violence and healthy relationships, if that is something that you or someone you know needs help and assistance with. Rocky, when did you know you were magnificent?
Oh, always, always. I come from a family of people that made sure I knew that I should be proud of who I am and the people that I come from. I grew up a very proud child, but the only thing that seemed to be a problem was what I wanted to wear and how I behaved. And so, I think I learned very early to code switch to an existence that allowed me to be more palatable. There was a lot given to me in terms of tools to be successful around ideas of how I look or present myself. And that had to do more with not being seen as a threat to society than it did with my identity or sexuality. And, the funny thing about growing up in the church is that they do a very good job of talking to you when you're very young about what is accepted and what is not. In terms that make you feel as if if you pushed outside of that in any way, you were going to be a great disgrace to your family, which is something that a lot of people really want to avoid. So, things like not wanting to wear dresses, things like not wanting to go play with peers that made more sense for me, whether that's football or sports teams. Were indicators, I think, of what people called tomboys. And it was something that was a culture that was allowed but frowned upon. But what was specifically given to me very early, about the age of 3 or 4, was the understanding that I could go to hell for XYZ. And there began a number of things, including who I loved. And I knew very early that I tell my wife this all the time, that I had a little doll named Lisa, who was kind of a Raggedy Ann doll. And my family thought I was very weird that I wanted that doll so closely, but in my brain, that was my wife. And I was imagining this life for myself that was like me and this buddy going around the world, just being in love and no one really minding anything. And I fell in love about 1,000 times after that with my kindergarten teacher and all these things. And my love is what told me what my heart wanted. But my mind is what told me that what I wanted and who I wanted to be was somehow incorrect. And getting over that was the greatest thing that I ever did. But I knew always. It was just not being afraid of being exiled. Once that happened, once I was exiled, the freedom that came from reimagining my life according to myself was just a beautiful thing. So I kind of knew, then forgot, then knew, then forgot. But now I know, and I think I won't forget again. But that's my little story in a nutshell.
Thank you, Rocky. Yes, oftentimes we forget ourselves along the way. Toby, unmute yourself and then tell us, when did you first know that you were magnificent?
I think that one of my very first homosexual experiences in third grade, I remember as we were coming back after lunch, walking to the classroom in a line, I could see that the 8th grade boys had won some sort of a prize by collecting money for the schools. It was a Catholic school, so they were always collecting money for something. And the boys were playing basketball, and half of them had their shirts off. And I recognized something. Now, I had no idea what any of that was. This was in the 1950s. They didn't explain sex. there certainly wasn't a word in my youth for homosexual, but I also understood that these were feelings that I had. I knew they were supposed to be kept secret. I was in religious life out of high school, which was a way, I think, of avoiding the whole issue of growing up and getting married and dating girls and being normal. Fortunately, in that experience, I sort of learned that these feelings all involved love. I was in love with some of the other novices in the monastery. After I'm out of all that, I ended up later working in a mental hospital as a chaplain intern. The summer of 1969, the summer everybody came out. I had had a couple of experiences before. I had a couple of gay experiences, but I didn't really understand even what that was. One day, coming out of the hospital, one of the other chaplains made a joke about you homosexuals. And I got furious at him for saying that, not because it wasn't true, but because he was speaking ill of that. And I was driving the car. I started shouting at him, and I shouted at him all the way home. It's about a 20-minute drive. As we pulled into the lot, I ended up with, "And I am gay." And I count that as my coming out moment. And it was the summer of June 1969, the time of Stonewall. I had no idea what Stonewall was, but it was like that vibe was moving through the country. A wonderful opportunity I had. Well, what a neat time to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Toby. I think there's an excellent reminder in there, especially with that reference to Stonewall, that who could have known in the present then that it was going to be the thing that the youth that are watching this look back to as the start, though I do want to acknowledge it was not the start. It was one of the starts. Maybe it was more of the middle. Hopefully it's toward the end, right, Rocky? I know we've had that conversation before. It's like, this had better be the beginning of the end of all of these fights that we have to do.
And Kathryn, can I add to that, you know, it wasn't just that event of Stonewall. It was that people organized afterwards. In fact, you know, when we called the Gay Pride Day, the parades actually are a celebration, a commemoration of the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which happened a year after Stonewall. That's when, by getting together, gay, lesbian, what we now call queer people, we didn't think of ourselves with all the letters then. We didn't know about all the letters then. But they began to organize. It wasn't just something that happened, it was something they did.
Thank you for that context, Toby. So, looking at time and seeing where we're going to thread this story, I invite you to look back. Say hello to your 12 or 13 or 14-year-old self. What do you wish that 12, 13, 14-year-old you had known back then? What would you tell them? Anna, we'll start with you.
Gee, that's really tough, because I mean, I could have told my 12-year-old, 14-year-old self that you're transgender and that's okay. But anybody saying the word transgender back then would probably be met with like, what mental hospital you just escape out of. So I probably would have told myself it's okay to cry when the teacher tells a sad story. That's one of the things that I remember really well, how different I was. I mean, I would be crying like a baby every time the teacher tells a sad story, and none of my classmates would be. And I would have told my 12-year-old self that you're different, and that's okay.
It's very sweet, Anna. Very loving. Darla, what about
I was
you?
thinking that at that age, I probably wish that there were more counselors that I could have talked to, knowing that, someone that I could trust, because I never really talked to anybody about, the way that I was, the way that I felt. So I think back then, I wish there were more counselors, more mentors, so to speak. But then I think that a lot of people were afraid, who were gay and lesbian or transgender, to talk to younger people, because then other people start thinking, well, they're just trying to recruit them. That was to me, that's how some straight hetero people think, old school people, because even today, it's like that, and I know for me, there's a fine line. If I'm there, if someone, for me, for example, if at the university, if they want to talk, then I'll talk to them, but I don't go out and say, present myself to them, because I think it's real important for all of them to realize that, they do have someone they can trust, and talk to. So back then, I wish it was that way for me, because that was probably in the 60s. That was in the 60s. And so there's a lot of things. I mean, in high school, we played girls half court. I mean, we didn't play full court, we played half court. So there was a lot of things that were still, the women, you're in your place, the men, the boys, you're in your place, that kind of thing. So for me, it would have been, back then, I wish I would have had somebody to talk to. So, and nowadays, there are people to talk, for younger people to talk to, which I'm really thankful for. And that's why we are here, right? Okay.
Correct. And I will remind those watching that if you or anyone else you know needs assistance, there are hotlines like the Trevor Project if you're feeling in a really bad way. And if you're in Austin or Central Texas, Out Youth stands ready to offer you the help and support that you need through counseling, support, drop-in center stuff, support groups. Rocky, knowing you as well as I do, my friend, I am intensely curious what you would tell little you.
Oh, little me. Oh, little me. 12-year-old baby me. Look how cute you are. Nice Dare t-shirt, by the way. That never really pans out for a lot of reasons that have to do with the Dare Corporation and how they disenfranchise our community. But we'll get into that later when you have some time to read more books. Listen, you are so beautifully and wonderfully made. And I just don't think you have any idea how not alone you are. And as a matter of fact, you have the coolest community that completely understands exactly how you feel when you wake up every day, exactly what you wish for every night before you go to sleep. And it will happen, and it will be better than you ever imagined. But you have to be patient. And I love you a very, very lot. And so do the people around you, even though they don't understand. Yeah, that's it.
Rocky points out something that is very common in the work that we do at Out Youth now, especially with young adults and adults, which is this idea of reparenting oneself. So it is why we framed this question that way, of imagining going back in time and giving yourself that love that you needed and may not have gotten. Toby, what would you tell little you?
I think that I would say that it's okay to have a body. I was growing up in a somewhat earlier time, but there's a way in which religion hasn't changed that much. We are, in modern Christian America, things that have to do with the body and pleasure are presented as evil and wicked, and it's kind of fun and funny, and some of the stuff is desirable because it's wicked, instead of all of this being presented as a wonderful blessing. There's a way in which we live in the Garden of Eden, and everything is perfect all around us, and our lives are perfect, and we're perfect, but we've been taught to feel guilty about everything and to hate ourselves. It occurred to me the other day, this is a sort of a joke, but the Christian teaching is love other people as you love yourself. And unfortunately, because so many good Christians hate themselves, they end up hating other people because that's how they feel about themselves. We should learn to love ourselves, really, and love life.
Well said, Toby. I will insert myself just briefly into this because it is a question that I have toyed around with for the past 6 months. And I do delight in the thought of going back in time to see 12-year-old me, seeing the look on his face, and instead of explaining any of it, just saying, it's a really long story. And kind of like Rocky, like, we'll get to it in a minute. You are loved, you are acknowledged, you are accepted, you are surrounded, and you don't know it. So, hearing a lot about living authentically, loving oneself, finding community. Thinking back between then and now, things have changed. We can argue all day long about whether they've changed for good or bad. But something we point out at Out Youth quite often when elders sometimes make the offhanded comment of, oh gosh, the youth have it so much easier nowadays. I get a little protective and a little angry because the reality is it's not gotten easier, it's just different. Things have changed. An example I pointed out earlier today was in 2015, the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage, yet in the state of Texas, LGBTQIA+ youth are not covered or protected by the state's Romeo and Juliet laws. So it's not easier. This is different. I invite you to think back, and I do realize, Anna, going in alphabetical order is terribly unfair to you, so we're going to allow our panelists to raise your hands. I was like, oh gosh, I put Anna on the spot twice now. Thinking back, what is the 1 or 2 or 3 gigantic changes, events, milestones that you have seen in your lifetime that have brought us to this moment, imperfect as it may be? But what are those things that stand out? What are the magical things that happened that perhaps only you know, because they're not captured in the wider history?
Okay. I think that it's really changed a lot because a lot of the younger people are speaking up for themselves now, more so coming out, so to speak. And also in some of the groups that I have been involved with, they include younger people, they include the youth, and we educate them, you know, and let them know. I went to a Sundance one time out in Arizona, and I took my niece, and it was all women's, and so when we were there, there were women all over. It was only women, and there were, of course, women around there with shirts off, and then when she seen them, she covered her eyes. She says, "I don't have a shirt on." I said, "I know." I said, "You don't have to look." But she only knew her auntie as a lesbian. I was the only one in her life that she knew that was that way. But when I took her out there, it opened her whole view of there's more people, there's more women like her auntie, and they're good, you know. She made a lot of friends out there, and it opened up her vision. And I took another niece out there one time, and it opened her vision too. So I think that both of my nieces are straight. They have children. They're married, but they have that view of acknowledgement. And so nowadays, like Toby, you led some of the path for some of the younger ones that are in that path now, and they're making very much achievements. So we can, as elders, we can sit back and watch them. We can sit back and they'll ask questions. And we can sit back and acknowledge them and give them encouragement and support. And most of all, love. Because in that way, they'll have that overall being of acknowledgement and knowing that it's okay, you know. So that's what I believe in, you know, what I've seen, and it makes me proud to see those young ones, the younger people step up, say, "I'm not afraid." Well, let us always be there to support them and give them whatever it is that they need, because I think it's real important for their well-being. And that's how I feel about it.
Yes. What are we doing to support one another, especially the generation that comes next? One of the things I often remark on is every generation is said to have that one great thing that they have been charged to do, whether they know it or not. And for a very long time, millennials, my generation, I felt lost. We can't buy avocado toast. We can't buy houses. We're ruining everything, which from reading history, it seems like every generation does that. But I have come to understand that perhaps the role of my generation is to stand as the firewall between the old and the new, and to protect them in the way that Darla is talking about, that to stand as that firewall against all the things that came before that were not helpful, so that they can go and create wonderful and marvelous things.
Mm-hmm.
Our other panelists, what milestones?
Thank you. Before I go though, I want to take just a couple of seconds to say how grateful I am that Austin has an organization like Out Youth. Kathryn said before about how Out Youth stands at the ready to assist and advocate for queer kids in the area. And speaking as a representative of PFLAG Austin, I am so grateful that we have Out Youth, because we have had so many parents coming to us with children young and in the age range that Out Youth advocates for. that we don't have much knowledge or information on how to help them, how to assist them. And I'm so grateful that we've always been able to say our youth is here and they're wonderful. And so yeah, I'm very grateful for that. As for, I guess, foundational moments, maybe I share two, one within me and one without. For me, as I mentioned before, the moment that I realized how I want to spend the rest of my life, up until that point, I had spent upward of a year simply agonizing over whether or not I am trans enough, and that this is something that I want to go forward with, because clearly it's a huge decision. It was for me. For me, it was a doorway that if I step through, it's going to close, and I'm not going to be able to step back. So that took me a long time. But the revelation that came to me was, I asked myself, that I stumbled upon the question of how would I rather live the rest of my life? And it wasn't really, maybe it wasn't exactly the question that helped me see, to see clearly. It was the answer to it. It was how quickly and emphatically and clearly the answer came to me that this is how I want to spend the rest of my life. That's when I knew. The other thing that I think is kind of like a turning point out there is there are a few, but I will dwell on this one because I think it has the most positive impact. And that is when somebody famous and well-known stood up, be proud of being transgender, and not be ashamed, neither for themselves nor for the community. And that was Laverne Cox. The moment that when I saw her on the cover of Time magazine, I think that kind of like the trajectory of people's awareness of gender kind of took a really sharp turn towards a positive. And I think that for me, that was one of the big turning points.
Before our other panelists chime in, I would ask E or Frederick, if you will Google for that Time article. It's funny, Anna brought that up. I was just researching that exact thing today. From 2014, Laverne Cox, the first openly transgender woman on the cover of Time, being interviewed for an article called The Transgender Tipping Point. We can get a link to that in the chat, I think. That'd be astounding. Thank you. Oh, look at that. Y'all are too fast. Toby, Rocky?
Can I answer the question? Because I'm 75 years old, I watched a lot of milestones go by in human evolution. Life today is tremendously different from what life was in the 50s. I think for people who did not live back then, it's almost unimaginable how different things were. For me, one of the big things, the event was the Summer of Love, the anti-war movement. We had what was called then the youth revolution and the generation gap. Darla, you'd remember the generation gap, yeah. We couldn't, you never trust anyone over 30. And we had the idea that we were creating a new world, Now, some of those things went crazy and the world didn't get remade quite the way we wanted, but what was called the counterculture, the hippie movement, the anti-war movement, really changed things. And the gay movement comes out of that. And I think one of the lessons that we learned in all of that was that the way we change the world is by changing ourselves. We can't wait for them to change. We have to start living the way we want to live. And we have to change how we think about ourselves. The world gives us so many negative messages. I mean, even if you're a straight, white, rich man, you get tremendously negative messages. Look at the rest of us who are in one way or another disenfranchised. We've been told all our lives that there's something wrong with us. And if we buy into that and believe that they're right, then they're right. If we say, no, I'm going to look for the positive traits in my life. I want to see what is good about being a gay man. I want to discover what's good about letting the woman inside me come out and make a change and be who I want to be. So the 60s were a tremendous movement. AIDS then was a tremendous change in the whole world, in which, in a way, all that stuff collapsed. The words that we use changed. Gay came to take on a negative meaning instead of a positive meaning. We had the movie star in a way, Anna. We had Rock Hudson. Not in quite the same way, but suddenly the world recognized that some of the people they loved were gay people. And some of these great heroes of the culture were homosexuals. And that changed how they thought about AIDS. And it helped how we understood who we were. Then, of course, there's a whole other thing that happens with the awareness of trans as an identity. And as you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have trans people. We had transvestites. And that really meant prostitution, not being who you were. Very different world. Because we have, by becoming proud of being gay, we were able to see that being gay has so many levels and different shades. So now we have all these letters. I think the letters have gotten out of hand, but it recognizes that there's so many of us with our own special lives and our own special traits.
Thank you, Toby. One of the things we often remind the youth at Out Youth when they ask us, how do I change the hearts and minds of others? Say, sweetheart, that's neither your job or your place. The work of changing a heart has to be done by the individual. You can choose to walk that journey with them, but the actual work of changing someone else's heart is theirs and theirs alone. This piece of history of a time before words. We do have a lot of letters. And it changes on me. I've been at Out Youth for 15 years. I was at Out Youth when it was still GLBT. The beauty in it that I've found over time is that it shows how many of us there are, the multitude of the rainbow, and I think in a way helps solidify through whether I or you agree with this or not, through intimidation. It is one thing to say all those gay people, or like in Toby's story about his first coming out, the homosexuals. Well, It's not just the homosexuals anymore, sweetheart. It's all sorts of people with all sorts of ways of explaining who they know themselves to be. Rocky, I don't want to miss out on giving you a chance to highlight some of the things that you have seen.
Now, you know, as a millennial, I'm going to take this to sci-fi land. Because I'm going to go ahead and push back and say that if this was the movie Groundhog Day or Back to the Future, we have not reached the point where we have figured out that someone has stolen the sports atlas, or we haven't figured out that we have something that we have to unlock that unlocks this loop that we're in. And that loop is the loop of passing the oppression buck to the next generation. And I believe that what the next generation has taught us, I believe the children are our future, right? Teach them well, let them lead the way, so on and so forth. Whitney gave us everything we needed to be successful and no one listened, but I'm gonna try to help us. I think to get out of this Groundhog Day situation where we're repeating the same trends in this universe, I feel like we're in the dimension where we don't really hear each other. We don't really hear that we need to reclaim spaces for people whose land this is. We don't hear that we need to listen to Black people, specifically Black trans people. We don't hear the people screaming to us to make the changes quickly and not ask for too much. Instead, we pass that on to generation after generation. And I will say that our generational wealth is the fact that we have prevented erasure to this point, and we brought ourselves to an archival place where we can begin to expand the world around us to bring more knowledge to people that are lost. That was not available to us before in the other dimensions. But in this dimension, we do have the ability. We are using it now. What we don't have is that can-do attitude I like to see out of certain generations. We tired. Some of us are very tired. I know I'm tired. I'm only 37. So I see this, my place as a millennial. I think you tried to allude to this earlier, and I'm just going to say, I feel like our opportunity as millennials is to say, hi, we're millennials. We're not ruining anything. In fact, we have changed the game. Everyone who's anyone knows who we are as a community. They know that we've always existed, that we didn't start in the early 60s, that we started all the way back at the beginning of inception of human beings, that we exist as honorary humans that are probably here from a different space and time, and we have yet to understand the complexity that is us. We only use 10% of our brains. To pretend that we know where we're going or where we've been is ridiculous. But I will tell you, if we start listening to some people who tell us what to do now, we might get a lot farther. And I don't want us to pat ourselves on the back too close, too fast. I'm just going to say that. But I've seen a lot of change. And one of them is we can talk to each other right now like this and really hash it out so we can get on with it. You know what I mean? So that's me. That's what I got to say about that.
I'm going to take a point of privilege here. I thought about this a lot, given this current moment in time. And I know one of the things that will stand out for me is the global pandemic, how awfully it's gone, how poorly managed it's been, how many people we've lost. And necessity being the parent of invention. In what universe would I have ever imagined to be in the same virtual room with the four of you? In what universe could I have imagined that we would have a youth from London and France and Japan drop in to our virtual drop-in center? At Out Youth, that scrappy little nonprofit that has that little blue house on 49th and a half Street. The one that started before there was internet. To exist in a time where we have the technology and the ability to bridge distance when we started in living rooms. and the beauty of now being with all of you in your living spaces, maybe not living rooms. I'm not going to ask that as a question, that would be weird. It's interesting how things come full circle. So we intend Q plus EDU to be primarily for youth, but we're not going to pretend that educators and parents, trusted adults, family members are going to be watching this too. So we ask, what advice do you have for them? The parents, the trusted adults, the teachers, caregivers, who are not members of our community, but desperately want to do that which we do, protecting the next generation.
If I may, I'm going to jump in. I've attended PFLAG support group meetings for over 7 years now. The first few years because I needed support. Now because I can and I want to give support. And one thing that I've seen time and time again in adults, parents who has a young person in their life who just came out as queer, that they have this, it's almost universal, that they have this impression that this is so sudden, this is just a phase. And I love to remind them that, yeah, to you it's a phase, to you it seems sudden, but to them it's something that they've lived with possibly since they were born. They knew who they are, they knew who they are attracted to, they knew how they want to present themselves all their lives. It's only you who just found out about this last month or last week or yesterday. So try to remember that and not question whether it's something that's innately within them, that is not a phase and that is not sudden.
Thank you, Anna. I'm going to speak to a younger version of myself, which I know is cheating, given the question and all the other youth on the call. Anna's right. We have the unique gift of being able to sit in ourselves and to know ourselves for a very long time before we come out, in many cases. And try to keep that in mind when you come out and your parents aren't perfect with your name or pronouns 16 hours in. Now, 16 years in, we have a problem. We need to talk about it. Call out, youth. I will sit your parents down and have a conversation. Toby.
You know, what is also an implication of what we have just observed, we had a long time, and for our parents it was sudden. It's going to take them a while to understand. They need to go through a process. And so we need to be compassionate with them and realize this came as a shock, although frequently it wasn't such a shock. So I think frequently, oh, I thought you told me already. This is a surprise. You know, the other thing that I would want to tell the parents is that you are so lucky. Most children end up marrying and having families and start the next generation. The gay, trans, queer kids who don't quite fit in are, these days it is possible to have children and adopt children and all that, but for the most part, we don't start a new generation. And so the queer kids are going to be the ones who are going to be the parents' best friends. Parents with gay children, with queer kids, are really the lucky ones.
my favorite thing when encountering those who do not like us. Why are there so many trans kids nowadays? Well, y'all won't stop making them. What do you want me to do? Darla or Rocky?
Oh, in different tribal nations, it is understood that for many years, long time ago, when children were born that way, you know, they were considered gifted, and they were considered holy. And back then, before colonization happened, we were accepted, because many of us had gifts to share with the community. And then once colonization started, then that's when the stigma of, well, your child is different, your child is acting like a girl, or your child is acting like a boy. Well, you know, then things began to change. But as it is now, there are some tribes that accept and acknowledge their children in that way, and they support them and they love them. But there are those parents who you know, I've heard stories of them abandoning them, or making them leave, and, you know, just putting them out there in the cold. And to me, that's really ruthless and mean. But there are parents, I guess, that are like that, and it hurts my heart to know that. But if we can be so-called educators, and you know, make ourselves known and put it out there, that if they need for us to talk to them, not just to their children, but to them, to the parents, then give them an understanding and perception of, you know, for example, of what I'm going through, or who I am, and the acknowledgement of being who I am. And I love the way I am. I'm not going to change for anyone. So it's that feeling that, you know, that we need to give support to the parents, and also to the educators, you know, the people in high school, the educators in high school, the educators in colleges. And there are some instructors that do have seminars, or, you know, a special section in their classes where they'll have somebody from the outside community come in and speak about their gender, or about the, you know, who they are. And I was asked one semester to do that for this teacher out at Haskell, and I did that. But I didn't use any, you know, you know, like things to help me, you know, a projector or anything. But I told her that I would just show her some brochures and things of different societies. Two-spirit societies is what we call ourselves. And in gatherings, and tell them what it was like, and, you know, what we do, who we represent. And so it's things like that you know, a lot of I guess classrooms should open it up for people, for educators, for people like yourselves. And you probably already do it with your youth. You know, I'm hoping that they reach out to you and say, can you come talk to our class? At least let them know that this is what we're about. This is what it's all about. And that way they can acknowledge it and know about it, you know. And my thing is, parents, they know how you are. And so some parents, my parent knew how I was and didn't question me about it, but just accepted it. But when I wanted to talk about it, then they would talk to me about it. Because I have never had no children. Before my mother passed away, I told her I'm sorry to give her no grandchildren. You know what she said? Well, at least I have you. That touched my heart. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. If we can be out there for the parents, to talk to the parents, or we can be a reference point, that would be great, you know. So I say kudos to those of you that are working with the out youth. You know, we don't have anything like that here in Lawrence, Kansas. Maybe there should. Maybe that's maybe it's, you know, something that's out there. And I'm putting it out there that something like that can happen here in this community. So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you, Darla. And the beauty of being in a virtual world right now is those youth who are in Kansas are welcome to join the drop-in center. I would like to ask our moderators, can we get a link to storiesandnumbers.org in the chat? Out Youth partnered with the University of Texas at Austin on a project called Stories and Numbers that seeks to empower teachers, parents, family members, community members who are adults to use numbers in order to tell stories about LGBTQIA+ youth in order to create change in their school communities. Rocky.
There's so much. What am I covering? There's so much. I wanted to actually. I love what we were just talking about parents taking care of their children. We are seeing, like, I'm on a little app called TikTok, which means that I want all the parents out there to know that we have a window into your world. We see the interactions you're having. Your kids are kind of telling on you a little bit, and we already know that this service is something you need. Many of us in the community, especially in the trans community, especially in Black and BIPOC communities, we're starting to have a conversation about calling the parents in. Let's have a conversation about why our first response is fear. Well, that may be because right now we're on record for the deadliest year on record, I believe, for trans women in America, trans people. We've lost several people from all backgrounds and all communities, but more noticeably in the Black and BIPOC communities. And so now I agree, we need to have some deep conversations about protection of our youth. Mm-hmm. If we leave them out in the cold, this world will swallow them whole. And we know that. Mm-hmm. We know that when we send our young children out and we tell them to keep their hands on the steering wheel. And we know that when we send our young people out and we tell them to be very well-mannered, right? And we don't know that when they tell us something very vulnerable about them that is the truth. And the assumption that you know better because of something that you heard, as opposed to what we are telling you now, which is your children deserve nothing better, nothing more than an entire team that is just like, no, more than that, not nothing more. They deserve that and so much more. And we have the opportunity, especially here where we are, but there's a lot of richness in this world right now. There's a lot of wealth in our communities, especially in the communities of color that have risen up and built powerful systems. We have the ability to bring our children back home. We have the ability to learn and educate ourselves together as a family. I brought my mother and my family along through grace and love and a lot of hard conversations. But I guarantee you it's worth it. It's never going to be perfect, but you have to try, because I don't want to see them on TikTok walking down the street crying anymore, especially not to a Drake song, which is not cool. Like, it just makes my whole heart hurt. And y'all like don't even see it. You just don't see it. So whatever the person needs to look like, hi, I'm Rocky Lane. I'm a successful and very, very, very available person in this community to speak to. Just look at me and see the face of a child that needed people to believe in him. This is the face of what your children can be. I run the largest trans-led, trans-focused organization in the state of Texas, along with a wonderful team of children that were discarded. You have to know that you can't throw our legacy away because you don't understand. You give them to us, but do not send them out into the world. And that's what I want the parents to know. That's all I have.
Let us remind ourselves to not teach our children that their worth should be measured by how much pain they can endure. Last question for tonight, my friends. It has been made abundantly clear by our conversation tonight, conversations that have been happening for decades, that the ongoing fight for our people must be intergenerational. So, I'm going to play some Turn the Tables. How can youth best support their elders? And how can elders best support our youth?
Let me address this, mostly talking about it as a gay man, talking about gay male issues. One of the things that happens intergenerationally, I think, is a fear among the youth that the older men are going to hit on them, and it's frightening. And at the same time, there is a fear that the older men are not going to hit on them, meaning not be interested in them. We have a scary thing about sexual feelings. None of us want to reject somebody, but we also don't want to have to accept somebody. So I think one of the things, especially in working within the movement, is to realize that most of the people don't have sexual, what do you call it, secret motives, covert motives. We're working in this because we're working together to make the world better. And to the extent that somebody flirts with you, it's because they want to tell you that they think you're attractive. And this is a way to give you value, not a way to manipulate you. We have to hope that we are not as crazy about this stuff as the straight society that we see is, in which, you know, it's really gotten crazy now that flirtation seems to be, you know, you've got to call the police if somebody flirts with you and you don't know. But there is a way to be loving and affectionate. And most of the time, I think, when older men are trying to work with youth, we're trying to encourage them, not manipulate them. And in turn, the youth shouldn't manipulate the older people, because there is a way in which youth have tremendous power over older people, because we are so afraid that our intentions will be misunderstood.
Thank you for voicing that, Toby. After 30 years of out youth, it is certainly something that has come up again and again and again. And it is one of the reasons that I still believe in 2020 is the reason why cisgender gay men make up such a small percentage of the volunteers and adults who assist with our youth, because of that fear. And Toby has set an excellent example for us here today, which is we must name the thing. We must put it out into the room and talk about it. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily fix any of it, but not talking about the elephant in the room is not helping anyone.
No, in my culture, the younger people, the youths are supposed to respect the elders. And I don't know if any of you have noticed in different cultures, if a youth is speaking to you, they don't look at you in the eye. They don't look at you. They'll talk to you with their eyes down, because that's out of respect. So when I come across a youth who doesn't portray respect for me, then I try not to take it personally, because I feel like there's something going on with them, and they're just venting. And so when situations like that happen, because I'm working at Haskell Indian Nations University, and I work in a housing. I'm a college resident assistant, so I'm there for them. And so there are times I've been through abuse, verbal abuse, but then I'm just nice. I still be nice to them. I'll still talk to them nice, because I know that whatever conflict they're going on within themselves, they're just projecting it and taking it out, you know. And so it's something that they're going on with them. And as far as being an elder for a youth, like if I have a student that comes in with me, I'm very careful about how I present myself to them, especially if it's a lady, especially if it's a woman, because I do not in any way, shape, or form want to feel like I'm projecting myself to them in that kind of a flirtatious way you were talking about, Toby. I don't want to do that, but I do want to be there if they need support, if they need guidance, if they need someone to talk to. I make it available for them. And you know, I've helped and talked with different young ladies that have come across, you know, in my dorm, and you know, I think they value that to the point where they will actually call me auntie, or even grandmother, or even sister, and I respect that, you know. And so in that way, you know, I think that a lot of the kids, the young people, they should respect their elders. It doesn't matter what color or what nationality you are, you know. And with that and being said, I find that a lot of the youth that do respect elders have always been brought up by their grandparents. There's just something about it. There's just something about the grandparents, you know. And so, but you know, I think it all starts out in the home. Always does. Always has. Always will. And so, you know, youth to elder, elder to youth. That's how I feel about it, you know. And I do, you know, the youth have very much power. They have so much power that they do not know that themselves. They have that power of energy in them, and they can do. There's nothing in this world that they can't do. But now, like what Rocky was talking about, you need that support. You need that love. You need that those arms. You need that community. It doesn't just start with the family. It starts with the community. You know, just little steps. Maybe it might take a little bitty baby steps, but once you get into that movement, then it happens. And so that's how I feel about the relationship between youth and elder youth. I'm there for them if they ever need me, and you know, and I put it out there. But like I said, I'm careful. I'm careful. I have to be careful, and you know, and I know that you know, Rocky, you're talking about, you know, being flirtatious and all this, that some of them might try to project that. Then you just have to deal with it in such a way where it doesn't interfere with those boundaries, because I'm very strict on boundaries. So that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darla.
I think right now what I'm noticing is that youth are having a hard time seeing their place in everything, and that elders are having a hard time seeing the youth for what they are bringing to the table. And I would just want to encourage more opportunities to do intergenerational planning strategies. Some of the best work that I've done has been in these models. I was raised by my grandparents. It is something that I deeply believe. I also started my career in health and wellness as someone who worked in nursing home care and took care of elders to really lock in a deep empathy that I think we all could flex as a muscle. And I've held many people in their last breaths, and I know that what they truly want to know is that they're seen and that they're loved in those moments. And I think we're all asking for that all the time. And something that elders bring to youth, I think, is a quiet calm that I certainly got from my elders along the way. And I would welcome us to continue to stay open to the possibility. A lot of youth are asking for impossible things, and I think it's wonderful. And I think that we can just kind of all know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and not not come after each other too much. It's an evolution we're doing together, and I think it's beautiful. And I also want to say that I think that we should continue conversations like this so that it is more available to people in the crevices of this country. Until we can all run away to our own island, this is our only place to connect. And I think this is truly a great and intergenerational approach. And I'm very proud, I want to say, of E for this wonderful gift to our community. And that's all I had to add. Thank you.
I guess I want to go back and expand on a couple of points that we touched upon. As far as what the older generation, what the parents, the educators can do for the younger generation, especially for students and sons and daughters who are coming out. And that's the previous point that we talked about, and that is that it may seem sudden and it may seem like a phase, but to them it's something that they lived with all their life up until that point. So the parents may be very concerned, and for good reason, but it's not sudden. And it's not a decision that's taken lightly. The flip side of that, which Toby also touched upon, as well as Kathryn, is that the sons and daughters and the students need to cut their parents and teachers some slack, because by the same token that they have known who they are, whom they are attracted to for all of their lives, their parents, their teachers, their elders don't. So if they mess up on the pronouns or on your name that you just revealed yesterday, that's because they've known you all your life as not who you are, as not the pronouns that you're now going by. So be patient, certainly in that respect. And the second thing for the younger people is that your parents and your teachers and your elders probably don't know what's right and what's wrong any more than you do. But one thing's for sure is that they have seen a lot more than you have. And that's only something that time will bring. It's not that they're better than you. It's not they're smarter than you. It's just that they old geezers. We are old geezers, and that we've seen a lot more. And there is truth to the what that saying is about. Wise old age. We may not know what's right or what's wrong, but one thing is very sure is that we have seen a lot.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. If you will indulge me for one moment. Thank you all for joining us. I went out of focus. There we go. Thanks, Rocky. These are critical conversations, important conversations. One of the things I do in my spare time is research the evolutionary importance of storytelling to our species. And it's through these stories of sharing our histories, these points in time, from all these different perspectives, that we start to weave a fabric for our youth that we may not have had when we were younger. So my thanks to each of you for joining us. May we gather together again very soon. I'm going to end with, sorry, but we kept talking about ancestors. No matter where you live, it is important to know this. Trans, gender non-binary, queer people have often held a revered place in their societies. We have been healers, shamans, revered rulers. We are no less than the stars, and we are expressions of all that is beautiful in this universe that knows no other constant but change. So go forward in your life, in your world, knowing that you are perfect, whole, and complete. Operate from a place where you know your own power, your own marvelousness. Know, sweetheart, that your ancestors were no less than gods. So, we'll leave it there for tonight, friends, and hope to see you all again very soon.
Thank you. See you.